Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm reviewing It Chapter 2. And this was directed once again by Andy Muschietti and stars James McAvoy, Jessica Chastain, Bill Hader and Bill Skarsgård and a variety of others. This film really takes place 27 years after the events of the original. It looks at all the Losers Club and where they are now and the lives that they're living. And it really looks at how one of them's still in the town, everyone else has moved away, Mike's still there. And ultimately he becomes aware that Pennywise has once again returned and is starting to take children once more. He ultimately makes a phone call contacting everyone who doesn't really have a lot of memory of what transpired for them when they were young. And they ultimately all unwillingly come back to Derby and have to once again band together to, stop Pennywise once and for all. And Mike has a plan of how to do that, and it's ultimately about how they all come back together and ultimately stop Pennywise once and for all. Look, overall this film was solid. I was looking forward to it after really enjoying the first film. I tried not to have high expectations going in. I heard a variety of different things with this film. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Some people said it was okay, and some people said it was not as good as the original. I went in trying not to expect too much with this film. And look, there was things I really liked about and things I didn't. And to me, this film really surpasses the 90s miniseries that did, especially the second half. This is 10 times better than the miniseries they did with Tim Curry. So look, I'll start with the positives. I think the casting was brilliant. Each one of the actors they got to play the adult version of the kids was fantastic, and you were really believable as these characters. I think James McAvoy was a really good choice playing Bill. And when you first meet him, he doesn't have that stutter that he used to have as a kid. He's sort of outgrown that, and when he returns back to the town, that's when the stutter begins. I think Jessica Chastain's really great too, casting as Bev. She really encapsulates that young actress that they had in the first one, and you really believe this is her grown up, and she's quite successful, but ultimately she's ended up marrying a man that's very similar to her father, controlling and quite abusive. She's also one of the characters that, from the first film, she was sort of hypnotized and she levitated in that moment where they had to save her in Pennywise's lair. And she sort of had visions of what they were going to be like in the future. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And I wanted them to pursue that a bit more. They did a little bit, but not as much as I expected within this film. And I thought that was something they could have done could have focused a bit more on and give a bit more, storyline to. And the character Eddie, this time played by James Ransone, who I think is really, really great and really encapsulates the young kid that they had in the first film. And he's very, very funny, and the way he bounces off Bill Hader's character, Richie, is really great, and they have really great moments together, but he sort of shines in this. The actor they got playing Mike's a good choice, Uzziah, the actor's name is, and I think he does a really great job, and he's believable as this character that stayed in the town and he knows everything and has been working out a plan for the last 27 years of how to overcome Pennywise upon his return, if he does return. Playing Ben this time is Jay Ryan. He's an Australian actor who's done a variety of things, and look, he's believable as his character and he does a solid performance here, and I kind of liked him. I always thought he was a bit young to begin with, but they put a bit of grey in his hair so you can really believe he is a bit older than he looks. But to me, the two characters and actors that really steal the show and steal this film is the two Bills. Bill Hader is absolutely fantastic as Richie. He's believable, he's funny, he's dramatic, he has some of the best lines and some of the best really humorous moments within the film, which I really loved. And he really shines here. He's a comedian really trying to show that he's more than just a comedian, that he can do dramatic things. There is a lot more to him than just humor. And he gives a real believability and life to Richie as an adult in such a really great way. And obviously Bill Skarsgård. He's fantastic as Pennywise. Gives a really great performance once again, has some really great moments, and from the trailer there's this moment where his face is all white and he scrapes it off. That's a great scene, and I think he's very menacing and interesting and kind of absurdly humorous in many ways. He sort of shines here. So the other things I liked when they all went back to Derby and they sort of meet at this Chinese restaurant, and there's this really great moment where they're sort of reconnecting with each other and starting to slowly remember things because they've forgotten what's happened. As they've moved away, they've forgotten it. And it isn't until they're all together they slowly start to remember what transpired for them when they were kids and the pact that they made to come back if Pennywise did to really stop him once and for all. But this scene's really great because you get to learn a little bit more about the characters. Bill Hader's really funny. There's a lot of humor in the scene. And it's just really about them connecting in a more interesting way than what we saw in the beginning of the film. And this scene, towards the end of this scene, it gets a bit strange and bizarre and it doesn't quite work. But as a beginning, I thought it was quite a solid way to introduce the characters once again to each other. And it helps us familiarise ourselves with these particular characters. I like the idea that what they did was they focused on a period of time that we didn't quite see in the first film. So in the first film, they all get into a fight and they sort of break off and go their separate ways and they come back towards the end of the film. So in that period where they split away, that's where we sort of focus on. They ultimately have to find particular things in order to use against Pennywise, and they sort of have to go back to their childhood. And so we see them as an adult and a child, and what transpired in those moments when they're away from each other. And I thought this was kind of clever because rather than rehashing everything they'd done, which they do a little bit, but rather than rehashing what we'd already seen, they sort of added an element that we didn't see, and I thought that was kind of clever. And we also get to see that they had this secret clubhouse that was hidden underground that was built by Ben, and I really liked that. I would have liked to have seen that in the first film in a different way, because I thought this was an interesting way of having them all spend time together and really bonding, and I felt that this scene was really important in that bonding moment with the characters. Some of the scenes that Pennywise is ultimately attacking people are really great, especially one in a baseball game with a little girl. It's a really, really great scene, and I really love what they do there, and Skarsgård's fantastic in that little scene, and it's beautifully shot and lit. I think this film was beautifully shot. It looked really nice and great. You really got a sense of being in the town once again. And that time had passed, but you really felt like once you returned to the town, and it's still the same as it was in the first film, and I really liked that as well. I thought that felt like time hadn't passed, things were still the same, and I liked that they kind of gave this Pennywise a bit of a backstory of who he was and where he came from a little bit. Not as much as I would have liked, but enough to sort of get a sense of who he is and where he came from and why he's doing what he's doing now. And I like that each of the characters return to something. They got to obtain something. And returning to those places that they grew up and those places they spent time was really interesting. I felt we got a bit more of who these characters were than we did in the first film, and I liked that. I thought that was an interesting way to take it and an interesting thing to do. I like it wasn't so filled with jump scares. It was stuff happening in the background off camera, which I really liked. We got to see that scene that was the original teaser trailer where Bev returns to her childhood apartment, and the things I didn't quite like about it. I felt the runtime. I felt it was a bit long. I felt that scenes drug on too long, and that we should have had a bit more of a purpose and a bit more of a structure, and it was a little messy in parts. Even though I still liked it, it was just stuff that they could have tightened it a bit more. Much like the first film really knew what it was and what it was trying to do and where it was going. This one was trying to still find its feet even halfway through the film before it really got to what story it was focusing on or what it was trying to tell. I didn't really like the start of it. The very beginning was kind of interesting. It had that scene, right at the end of the first film where the kids go their separate ways, which I really liked, and they had a bit more of a story happening there. But once we met all the characters once again as adults, I didn't really care too much about the jobs they were doing or who they were as people now. I just wanted to see them go back to the town. And it wasn't until they got to the Chinese restaurant that I really became interested in the film once again. I just felt there was a period of maybe 10-15 minutes that I didn't really care much about it. It wasn't until they returned to the town that it became sort of an interesting film for me. The other thing I didn't like is there's a lot of moments where the adult versions of the kids come face to face with Pennywise, and when that happens, he changes shape and he gets really big in parts, or there's big things that attack the characters, and I really don't like this. This is a pet peeve of mine, where they make really big things all the time. I don't really like that. If it's a King Kong or a Godzilla or a monster film or a dream sequence, look, I can accept that. But when it's sort of meant to be real and a shape-shifting character, I just didn't really like that. And there's the stuff at the end where he transforms as well, which I really didn't like at all. I thought it was better when he was normal size. There was another thing that kind of bugged me a little bit. When we had the flashbacks of the kids, you could clearly see that it had grown and got older, that time had passed for them, but they were meant to be the same age and look the same, but they didn't quite look the same. And that sort of took me out a little bit of the story, because I couldn't quite buy them looking the way they did, even though they're much older than when we first saw them in the first film. I think they took too long to shoot these scenes, and I felt like, why didn't they shoot these scenes when they were shooting the first film? It would have worked a lot better. But I guess they weren't quite sure if the first film was going to do well, so that's why they chose to do it this way. I don't know if I really liked the ending. I felt the film could have ended much earlier than it did, and I know it was closing out the story, but it just seemed to drag on a little bit, like Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. It just had so many endings, it didn't really know which one to pick, so I just threw them all in there. And there's sort of a moment where they're coming face to face with Pennywise towards the end, they're battling each other. And just the way that ends, I don't know if I really loved that either. And they didn't go into enough backstory about who Pennywise was, where he came from, or how he got there. And I just felt we needed a bit more information with that. And like I said earlier, with Bev's sort of visions that we have, we never actually get to see her having them. It's always the after effect, or she tells them what happened rather than we see it. And I would have rather seen it, to tell you the truth. Some of the CGI didn't quite work either, especially when Pennywise is towards the end of the film where his face kept changing. It just didn't look quite good. The special effects and animation within the Chinese restaurant scene just didn't work for me either. I think overall, they just waited too long to do a sequel. They really should have done the first film and then done the second one, so people still had the excitement and the enthusiasm for the particular storyline. Because when the first film came out, no one really knew what to expect from it, what it was going to do, or how good it was going to be. And it became word of mouth and became quite successful. So the expectation of the second one was really high. But if it came out at the height of when the first one was really popular, it might have been a bit better and people might have enjoyed it a bit more. I think they waited too long to produce the second film. With this one, where they're adults, there's not so much fear for them dying, I don't think, as there were as kids. You know, there's not an innocent feel about them that something bad's going to happen. Oh no, I don't want that to happen. You just don't feel a connection with it like you did in the first film. And I think that's what let this film down a little bit. But we had to have the second half, and we had to have them as adults because that's how the book goes. That's how the miniseries did. And I think this does a lot better than the miniseries in many ways. And they were introducing new and interesting ideas in this one that they didn't in the first film or didn't in the original. And I kind of like that. Final thoughts. I think ultimately what I got from this film is it's a good sequel. It's really about fear and regret, and how sometimes things happen to us as kids or young people and they affect us in certain ways. But as we get older, we start to lose focus on them and forget what actually happened. And then slowly but surely these fears and regrets and things that we went through rear their ugly head. And we ultimately have to fight them and overcome this, whatever it is that we've gone through, to get through it. And that's what this film really does. It's about these adults who've gone through this horrific thing. They've put it in the back of their mind, they've forgotten about it, but it's appeared again, and they have to go back into that scary place or go back to that moment they were in with that and remember what happened and try and overcome that. And I'm going to give it Chapter 2 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was above average. I didn't think it was as good as the first one. It had some good ideas, but overall I didn't love it as much. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the subscribe down the bottom. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.